Hello and welcome to another episode of Nuendo in 30. I'm Lee Riley, and in this episode we're going to take a look at workflows that may make you a little bit more efficient with Nuendo. Not even all of the integral features in Nuendo, but maybe that's not the most eye-catching maybe, or the coolest features, but I think really, really important nevertheless. So some of you may want to work a little faster. So today we're going to talk about templates, key commands, and some macros. So here we go. Let's look at this session. Right. Okay, this pool keeps disappearing for me. Well, okay, so imagine it. If you're working with the same kind of material most of the time, it would kind of make sense that you would make an initial session that you start from, right? And that's really what a template is. So that makes sense if you're using a music-based session, an audio post-based session, or gaming or anything else, right? Anything that you're working on, you want to keep coming back to. So right here, I've got a small audio post session, and I want to modify it with you, right? So with the audience today. So we've got something to start with. So we're going to modify it, save it, and we'll work our way through the episode. Cool. So let's take a look at what we're actually going to do. So I'm going to actually make, seeing as this is an audio post session, right? I'm going to make a new video track. Now I'm going to use my key commands, which I'm explaining what I'm using. This will be Shift Option T for me, right? We can make Shift Option N to make an audio track, Shift Option N T to make to physically add another track, a lot of other different group tracks, video, for example, sampler instrument. So I'm going to make a video track at first. I'm going to slide that up there. Excellent. I'm going to keep that there. So we want this to be saved, so we're going to recall this every time, right? Anything that we put in the session, we're going to recall, which means let's take a look in our little sound effects folder here, and we've got some mono tracks, and we have some stereo ones, but we don't have any Foley in there. So what I want to do is create like 4 Foley tracks, right, which is Shift Command N, and then those are my mono tracks. That I want to actually go to the sub, SFX sub, which will then in turn go to the master. So I'm going to name that Foley. I made a mistake, right? I should have done 3 more. Let's look at that. Let's call that Foley, because you know it's live. Make 3 more of those. Now scroll down here, and all 4 of those are now selected, right? I can make them what color I want to be, but here's a little secret. Notice that the sound effects themselves they're in a folder, and they're going to a group channel. I can create that just by creating a macro, actually. And that's Shift Option G, for example, and watch what happens. When I do that, it's doing 2 functions. It's creating and placing them in a folder, and it's assigning it these 4 tracks, whatever I have selected, is going into its own subgroup, which in turn is going out to the sound effects sub. Okay, so now I want that to be a stereo Foley sub. Okay. So we're building this slowly together, and the last thing I need to do here in this section is do this, and then of course command and click and color that, so that any given time I can do this. I can close this up. Now I've got the Foley situated inside of there. I've got my video track, I've got my Foley. All I need to do is create a Shift Option T again. And we're going to create an effects track with a reverence reverb on it, a convolution reverb. And of course, cunningly, I'm going to call that reverb or verb, right? So now I've got that. I can just switch that off to save a bit of horsepower, right? And now it's there anytime to recall when I'm making a template, right? So that's good, right? We can save it. We can just basically just save it on its own, but I want to save it properly as a template, right? Before I do that, I want to show you something here that inside, I had the pull window open because the pull window is going to show you everything about what's inside of your session. I have, of course, some 2-pops over there ready to move to other tracks and populate to other tracks. So I keep things in visually in line, right? And that's 2 seconds prior to the first frame of action. But what I want to do is, if I'm making a template, if I'm leaving, you got to be careful there. If you leave any audio in your template, it's going to be show up in your other templates. Right? It's not saving it inside of a session. It's going in a specific place. So what you want to do, maybe if you don't want any audio in there, you need to right-click and go in there and remove unused media. Right? So you want to get rid of that if you want to. If you don't need to. Right? Okay, let's save it. File, save as template. Now, I have many different templates that I can work with for music. Sometimes I just create an empty one and start working, right? But what I want to do is save this as an audio post template. The difference is these, like I say, are not being saved with the project per se. They're being saved deep inside your user folder. All right. It took me a while to figure this one out, actually, but now I'm going to share it with you. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to grab hold of this one here, and I'm going to right-click it, as well as renaming it or deleting it. I can reveal where this is in the Finder. This was something quite special for me to find, actually, because I wanted to take my templates, put them onto a thumb drive, and put them onto a different computer, my laptop. And I was befuddled, which is a great word, right? And I couldn't find them. So I just did a little bit of digging and some research, and what do you know? It's inside of your library, right? Inside of preferences, inside of the Nuendo 12 folder, and the project templates inside of there, right? So that's where all those things and your key commands are going to be stored. Nice to know, just in case you're moving, keeping it, your sessions on the move, and you want to take your templates with you. Why not? So I want to delete this one while we're here. I can just go ahead and delete that one. And of course, it's freaking out a little bit, saying, hold on a second, do you want to move this to the trash? Yes. So you can move this to the trash. And now I want to save my brand new one. Awesome. So I'm going to call this audio post. I'll call it small because it's a small session, right? I'm going to hit OK. There we go. I'm just going to save this as normal, and I'm going to close it. So I'm going to use my Command W, right, to close it. Now, look at this beautiful colored desktop that I have. So, yeah, if I'm starting from scratch, when you're making a new session here, the first thing I would do, it comes up with a new project, and then I can always go back to that audio post small, or I can start with like an empty one and build up and work on that. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reopen that one just to say. Actually, what I'm going to do, instead of creating the template, I'm going to go to my recent projects, right? Because that was the last thing that I did. Because it's something different. But that goes to show you that I could actually physically open that template and start working on that template. Awesome sauce, right? Cool. Right. What do we have next, ladies and gentlemen? It's time for a drink of water. your Cubase I/O setups. They actually will. This is a great question. I'm going to dive straight into this one. Can you back up, transport your Cubase and Nuendo audio I/O setups? Yes, if it's with your audio connections are going to be saved with your current session. So if you take your session, it's going to go with it, right? And there are your presets as well, right? So those presets are going to be in that folder. So take your session as well as delve into that folder and you'll see your presets there. And that's what you want to take with you. By default, Nuendo usually comes up with your last I/O, if you will, your last audio connection setup. So that should work. Excellent. Done someone justice this evening. Right, next thing is key commands, which we all know is near and dear to my heart, right? I talk about them all the time. And of course, you know me, I've got a key command for my key commands, which is K, right? So inside of here, we're going to talk about all these key commands. Well, not all of them, right? But some of them that we're going to make some together and show you how to navigate around this window and create some key commands. What are my favorite key commands? Well, why did I even bother with them in the first place? Well, I was working with a certain other DAW for many, many years. And when I switched and started working with Nuendo, it was just so daunting for me at first, right? And I also have a series on the channel, which is a small series for, getting from this particular DAW, which I can say, right, which was Pro Tools, coming over to Nuendo. And I felt a little bit more comfortable because some of the key commands were available to me, right? And that's the reason. I'll show you the presets in a second. And that made it a little bit more warm and fuzzy for me to come to Nuendo and say, okay, now I can use some of these. It's going to make me a little quicker. But if you're not quite sure which key command, what key commands there are, we'll figure that out, right, together. But if you look at the tooltip, right, if you look at the tooltip right there, it's showing automation panel. If there's an exclamation point next to it, that means it's not been assigned a key command yet. Okay, that's good to know. So if you're looking over here, let's just, for example, say the snap on and off is J. You can see the actual key command that's right next to it. So if I press J, you're going to see that going on and off, right? So my snap to grid is on and off. So that's a fun fact. That's something I recently found out. That's quite a good thing, actually. So there's one way of kind of hovering around to see what you have and what you don't. There's another one, which if we right inside the key command window, you can actually type in, assign, and search. But let's look at my favorite key commands first, which, happen to be anything with navigating, anything with bringing in things, importing things into the session, editing, all of those things. Like, for example, I got my up and down arrow, right? We've seen me work around this, holding down shift and up and down. Now we'll start to select those, and then control up and down arrow will do those, or option up and down is my entire session. All right, so once I've got something selected, Nuendo is definitely going to allow you to do a lot of stuff. So with M, of course, I'm going to mute. With N, actually, is solo. Don't ask me why I picked that, but I just did, because S is used for something else, right? So there's also a macro, which is if I do N, and anytime I select a track, it's going to actually solo that. I can do that with record arm. I can do that also with monitor, right? So there's a lot of stuff there that's going to help me. Importing tracks, right? So we've already talked about importing those tracks. and creating tracks, but removing selected tracks, right? So removing selected tracks is like shift delete. Now that's telling me that something's already on it. If I hit yes, I'm going to undo it, right? But it allows you to physically go and just do big tasks very, very quickly. Speaking of importing tracks, I'm going to build on this and show you some. All right, so Shift Option I now goes to import tracks from another session. So if you want to compile your sessions, compile your projects, build them up, and some of you may be working on maybe one person working on one aspect, there's another person working on another, right? So you can actually bring those in. So this is part of my favorite stuff, right? And I want to bring in the stereo and a mono track I have from another session. And of course, I want to bring in the events. I don't need to copy it for this particular reason. I'm going to look that everything is fine, works. I can actually put them onto other tracks, right? Overlay them onto other tracks. But this one, I want to make brand new tracks. So there they are. There are my tracks. As I said, I'm using my control up and down arrow. But this is what I want to focus on, the editing part, before I delve into the actual how we're going to do this. I can select across. You've seen me do this in Command T. These are like trim to selection in Pro Tools. I've used this before. This is what I was very familiar with. So I transposed or transported this over into this DAW. And I would go left of the cursor, which is A, right? Go right of the cursor, which is S. If I wanted to put a fade into the left, D, and then I would have G for fade out, and F for fade, etc., right? But those are my favorites. Okay, I'm going to look down at my cheat sheet now, and I'm going to start assigning some stuff, right? We're going to start building this and show you really how powerful this is so you can start creating your own if you haven't already. Now, the daunting task is the fact that how do we remember? Really, how do we remember where what they are? You have to have a really good brain for that, right? So there's a way of getting around it instead of writing stuff down and then what's the point? You can kind of search for stuff. So inside of here, you can figure out what's been assigned and what hasn't, right? So like, for example, I did the Shift Option T, right? The Shift Option T was adding my track, right? So the video track, instrument track, group track, FX track, and all that good stuff. And you can see right underneath that it tells me that that's there and it points to something, right? So it's pointing, oh yeah, it's already been used. It's been used by add track. Right, let's try Command equals. Command equals is another transplanted one, which I've gone and it's devices mixer. So in other words, if I wanted to see my mix console, I can toggle between the two, right? And then I always use this as the Option M, which is opening markers, my markers window. And then Control M, which is the media bay, right? And I can go and find that. And I can say, well, okay, great, but how do I assign a new one? Right, so I can go and look. First off, I can decide. Let's see if I go. Let's assign what key am I going to assign first? So I'm going to say Control Delete. There is nothing assigned to that, right? You don't see anything assigned to it. So you're thinking, well, cool, that's free, right? That's available. So what can I add that to? What I want to do is remove empty tracks. Which imagine you're working with a large session and you want to get rid of some tracks that has no audio on it. You want to clean up your session, maybe. So I'm going to type in remove and then search for that. So there's missing files, unused media, which is kind of a cool thing. But that's going to be out of the session and the pool. We're just going to keep going until remove DC offset, MIDI data. Okay, we're going to remove all this stuff. So look at all this stuff, right? But remove empty tracks. There it is. It's inside my project. So if that's in the project menu, right? So it's remove. So it's one of those things that anything that's there is represented in a menu. So remove empty tracks. Cool. I'm going to now assign control delete. There it is, right? So it's added to that. I can save that. I can use that. I can transport that with me wherever I'm going to go. I'm going to do another one, which is kind of like a macro in a way, because what I want to do is Control C. You think that, oh, is Control C available? Well, Control C is available, right? What I want to do is put that onto convert, if I could spell it. This is something I use all the time. Right here. Okay. If you've been using Nuendo a while, you know that you can actually have some stereo. Let's keep that there, actually. I'm just going to hit OK for a second. I'm going to come back to that. You can actually have a stereo file, a stereo event on a mono track, right? Boggled my mind straight away coming from the other DAW. And I said, well, okay, what happens if I want a true mono, right? So there's different ways of doing this, but this way itself, I'm doing this all the time. Whereas, okay, that was the last thing I just did. So let's go back to control again. I have to find it. That's the problem with, and I'm going to go through all, convert, sorry, my bad. Convert, because control, you can do a lot of control stuff. Mix convert, grace note, there we go. Multi to mono, multi-channel, mono to multi-channel, but I want to do it the other way. See how that's free? Multi-channel to mono. Right, I'm going to move this over here. And let's put in Control C. Control C, assign. And let's hit OK. Right, just to test it first. So Control C, there we go. It will split these into two. It will mute the tracks for me if I want it to. I've muted the physical track. So I can mute using my other commands, right? And then I can just delete one side, right? And that's now made two new mono tracks and created those. Awesome. I use this all the time. Right. Let's see. Oh, right. Let me look at my cheat sheet here. If I wanted to remove anything, right, it's simple. It's just as simple as clicking on it. There's my solo, and then just hitting the trash, right? And once I've finished, I can actually save or load the preset, right? It's actually going to store the preset right now, but I don't trust that. I'd rather physically store the preset because you know what? I may want to take it with me, right? And that's what I really want to do. So if I said, well, okay, my latest one is 2023 keys. If I press that right now, I'm going to go back to that previous version because I haven't saved it yet. I haven't overwritten it, right? So I can go in here and choose whatever I want, but I want to overwrite it. We know it's called 2023 keys. There we go. 2023 keys _ there we go. And it's going to say overwrite. Yes. Awesome. Right. Quickly, we're going to go into macros. Right. So this is a little segue into macros with the step of going with a key command first. Key commands, macros are just basically multiple key commands in a series. So they are actually listed here, right? They're listed. Can't see the wood for the trees. There we go. Macro, and I can show the macros right here. So I'm going to show those in a second. But what I want to do is one I normally use is track disable and hide. I love to disable and hide tracks, and I love to duplicate tracks without the data, right? Which I would normally do, which is my Option Command D. So it's doing two commands there. It's copying the track but omitting the audio, right? So it's doing kind of like a copying and deleting, in other words, but not deleting from the project, right? And then also if I wanted to, this is going to be, well, Shift Delete is going to get rid of it, but track enable is Shift Command T. So those are, if I bring up my key commands, you will see what that is. Hide selected channels and tracks, but I've also, this is technically a macro. So it is disable track and hide. And I'm going to look inside of, where are we now? There we go. I'm going to go to macro and open that up. And you can see disable track and hide has Command Shift T. Right? So those are two actual physical commands, right? So it's going to disable and enable, or whichever, it's a toggle. It's going to disable, and then it's going to hide, right? Cool. And what does that technically mean? Well, over to the side here on visibility, there it is, and it's hidden. Okay. And bring that back again, and you can see that both of those are disabled. If they're selected, I can make them enabled. Right. Sweet. Okay, let's make a macro together. Right. Let's say that I wanted to do multiple commands in one keystroke. And I wanted to take that clip, I wanted to normalize it. I wanted to select the whole thing, select the timeline, create a marker, get ready to name the marker, and then export that event or that clip. Impossible? No. Let's take a look. Right, commands. Here we go. So new macro. I'm cunningly going to call it new macro, even though I could double click that and rename it. What's the first one? Well, we want to normalize it. So I'm going to search up there for normalize. Okay. I'm going to search for normalize. There it is. So I need to select it to add it to the macro. Okay. Commands, add. There is normalize. That's the first thing. Now, the thing is that's going to bring up direct processing, right? And bring up the normalize plugin or whatever the setting I have set in it, but I want to apply that. So I should go to up here, go past macro. I'm going to use that in a second. Direct offline processing, apply is the next thing, right? So I'm going to add that underneath it in a chain. So normalize, apply, select in the timeline, right? Which if you've been watching my episodes, you know that I do that with P. Right, I'm going to locate us to selection, which is selecting the entire clip. You can see that right there. I'm going to hit select. I'm going to hit add. That's the next thing in the sequence. Now, to create a marker, we've got the selection. Now we've got to create the marker, which we know is Shift C if you've been watching this. And that is select to get over here, Shift C, there it is, add. So it needs to have a selection to create a marker, cycle marker, and an edit, and it'll allow me to name that as well. So the last piece of the puzzle here is going to be export. So it's going to be export mix down. which I have as Control E. Right? Export mixdown is the last piece. I'm going to add that. So, to recap, normalize, apply, locators to selection, cycle marker, naming, and then exporting. Done. All in one move. Right? This is kind of cool. One more thing we have to do, which is physically create the key command for the macro. Right? So I need to go back to my macros here, select it, and there it is. And where is it? New macro. Now, I thought of this earlier, of course, and it's export. So I figured, Command E, we know that that's not assigned to anything. So I'm going to assign that. Right? We're going to hit OK. And of course, I can move any of these. If I've made a mistake and put them in and out or in the wrong order, I can physically move those and swap them into different orders. It's going to work top to bottom. Okay. So I'm going to select this, right? And then what was the key? Command E. There we go. Everything pops up. It has normalized. Okay. It has normalized. It has applied loudness normalization at the settings that I wanted. There it is. The status is checkboxed. It's been processed already. All I have to do is name it. Right? Name it. And once I do that, you see how that goes up. Boom, boom. That's it. Of course, I've set all of my attributes here and where it's going to go and what output it's going to go to prior. Let's say we're doing a ton of these and we're just going through Command E, Command E, Command E, name, Command E, Command E, right? And just exporting everything. The next thing is just to add to the queue and then start the queue export. And of course, that's going to export it and it's done. Amazing, right? Thumbs up. Fantastic. One last thing. We're right at 32 minutes. Awesome. And you can see the little processing there. So there's just one little thing I want to share with you, and that will be my keyboard focus. And you see that you have focus. Look at the surround between there. It's focusing on what you want to look at, right? And use. And I use these sides a lot on the bottom and bringing up clips and making them bigger and showing the editor and navigating around a lot better. So those are at the top right. That's the reason why I don't have my face up there today, because I wanted to show you that right at the end. And if you hover over it, remember, it's Option Command L over there is now opening and closing, right? So that's left side. Right side is, guess what? Yeah, R. Right, so we have left and right. And we have E, which is the bottom, which is the editor or the mix console or the sampler control or whatever you would like there. And then we have T, which is the little transport section down at the bottom there, just to give you a bit more real estate. That's it. I keep looking up, and I think I answered your question there. And that's basically it. As I said, nothing new feature-wise, but it's something that I think that you get the most use out of, right? By doing things a lot faster and getting used to using macros and key commands and maybe some templates. You maybe you're using those already. Put in the comments to say, hey, which are your favorite ones? Which would you like to get advice on, or whatever it is? Just like, subscribe, comment. Awesome. So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. That's my little thank you for watching window. And I'll See me next time on episode 6. Have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, by the way, in the States.